Welcome back to Simply Southern. We've got our resident garden expert, Sid Phelps, with us again here today to answer questions from our viewers.
Sidney, thank you so much for being here. Our first question comes from Instagram and Miller Farms. She says, what plants are not good to have growing near each other because they might cross-pollinate?
So it's not as common to happen these days because you have a lot of hybrid varieties. But when you're dealing with things like broccoli or cauliflower, all of those growing together, traditionally we'll put those together for a cold crop garden. You want to make sure that you've got plenty of space between those because the way that they do pollinate. So keep good space between your cauliflowers, your broccolis, anything along those lines. Your lettuces and cabbages and collards will be okay, but those are some areas that they don't tend to work so great around each other, but you're not going to see a lot of damage. When you get into melons, then you can start looking at different things. If you're doing watermelons, cantaloupes, honeydews, all of those are more open pollinated style seeds. So traditionally you can see some kind of variation. So you can see a different flavor. It could be a little bit bitter, as well as being a little bit more sweeter sometimes. You can do the same thing with cucumbers, zucchinis, as they're all together. So when you're dealing with tomatoes and peppers, you're not going to see as much of an issue. Sometimes you don't want to put necessarily a couple things near each other. If you're dealing with really spicy varieties, you want to keep those next to something sweet. You could have some slight pollination cross there, but as far as the production, you're still going to get the same style fruit. So good question, but it's not as common anymore since most seeds are more hybridized to make sure that you're not dealing with as much disease.
Sid, we've got a question from our Instagram account. Chicken Farmer 2007. Are there any concerns using animal manure for nutrient source for gardening?
Coming from a chicken farmer, I'm pretty sure I know where the angle of this is. There are a few concerns, not necessarily from the health side of things. Manure is our natural fertilizer, so it works great. The concern is you can definitely put too much on, and with that, you can burn the plants up, especially if you're dealing with poultry or even cattle, manure that you're processing through. So the best way that I would recommend to do is take some of that, mix it into a compost, let it kind of burn off a little bit. The compost is going to be really good for nutrients. I know you use that a lot in your gardens, Jim, but when you're dealing with chicken manure specifically, it's very high in nitrogen, which is what you want in a lot of gardens. But the unfortunate thing is we can't get a good measure on it. So when you're going to buy your fertilizers or plant foods at a retailer, you're looking at the numbers. So like a triple 13 has got, across the board, it's an even balance. You want a high nitrogen product, so chicken litter is great for a garden, but you can easily add too much and completely burn the plants up. So moderation is best. If you don't feel like you're getting enough out of it, add a little bit at a time. Don't just lay it all out in the garden at one time, especially when you're doing container gardens.
Okay, good information there. Now we got a question from email from a guy named Jim, and he says that he has huge plants with no fruit. So what's the problem there?
A lot of the times you see that is basically blossom drop. Heat is the #1 concern with that. You can have a situation where you don't have enough calcium in the plant, but a lot of the times in Alabama, it's heat driven. So we see that a lot in tomatoes. They're just not producing. There are different potassium additives you can use, extra calcium additives you can use in the stores that would fix that. But for the most part, when you're dealing with heat with tomatoes, it's best to go with a heat tolerant variety. You'll see that production kick in.
All right. Sidney, thank you so much for all of those answers. Now, if you have a question about growing vegetables or herbs, drop Sidney a line at simplysouthern@alifarm.com.
Thanks for watching Simply Southern today, but we got to run. On next week's show, I'll show you how a dog really can be man's best friend, especially when herding cows.
And if you like heavy equipment, we'll show you how to get started on a new career in the forestry industry. I'm Mary Johns.
And I'm Jim Allen. We'll see you next week.
Simply Southern is a production of the Alabama Farmers Cooperative and the Alabama Farmers Federation.